Welcome to Dark Feed, where once you find the feed, it finds you. You don't hear much about the people who disappeared before the towers fell. Most of the stories from September 11th, 2001 begin at 8:46 a.m. They start with the scream of jet engines, the thunder of steel, the chaos. But there were others. People who vanished into silence while the world's attention was pulled upward, toward the burning skyline. People like Sneha and Philip. Sneha was last seen alive the night before the attacks. September 10th, a normal Monday in Manhattan. At 31 years old, she was a medical intern, the daughter of Indian immigrants, a bright, headstrong woman who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She lived in a small apartment on the Lower East Side, near the World Trade Center, with her husband, Ron Lieberman. He was also a doctor, an emergency room resident at Jacobi Medical Center in the Bronx. Their marriage had become strained, like so many in the city that never stops moving. Work hours were long, shifts bled into nights, and the pressure of two careers in medicine had created distance. Still, they were together. Still, they talked every day. And on September 10th, they spoke in the morning before he left for work. Sneha didn't have to work that day. Her residency had hit a snag, a pending disciplinary hearing over allegations of unprofessional conduct. She claimed she had been retaliated against for reporting sexual harassment by a fellow employee. Her supervisors told a different story, that she had a drinking problem, that she didn't show up for shifts, that she fell asleep on the job. Whatever the truth was, Sneha had the day off. She told Ron she planned to clean their apartment, do laundry, and maybe go shopping. He left before noon. That was the last time he ever saw her. The next time Sneha appeared on record was at 2 p.m. that afternoon. Surveillance footage shows her walking into a department store called Century 21, just across the street from the World Trade Center. She was alone, calm. She purchased a few items, lingerie, a dress, some shoes, and charged it to their joint credit card. The receipt put the time of purchase at 4 p.m. She left the store carrying 2 large bags and walked into the evening rush hour. And then, nothing. No more surveillance. No more phone calls. No text messages. No emails. When Ron returned home after midnight, he expected to find her asleep. Instead, the apartment was dark. The bed was undisturbed. The clothes she had purchased were gone, but her keys were missing too. Her wallet, her ID, her credit cards. Her phone, however, was still there, plugged into its charger, fully powered. She hadn't taken it with her. At first, he wasn't alarmed. Sneha was known to stay out late sometimes. She had friends across the city. She loved jazz bars, hookah lounges, quiet cafes where she could drink wine and sketch in her notebook. It wasn't unusual for her to crash at a friend's place without calling. But by morning, that casual shrug had twisted into dread. The first plane hit the North Tower at 8:46 a.m. From their apartment window, the smoke was visible. The rumble of the collapse shook the buildings nearby. Ron, still groggy from his overnight shift, stood frozen as the second tower was hit. Then the call started. Chaos rippled through the city like a wave. But there was no word from Sneha. No one had heard from her since Monday afternoon. Not her parents. Not her brother. Not her friends. And while most of New York panicked about the people inside the towers, Ron was panicking about the person who hadn't been seen since before the towers were even a target. He began calling hospitals, police precincts, friends. No one knew where she was. It wasn't until that evening, when the smoke began to settle and the enormity of the attack became clear, that the questions turned from panic to something colder. Where had Sneha gone? Why hadn't she come home? And was it possible, even remotely, that she had entered the World Trade Center that morning? That she had been one of the earliest casualties? The problem with Sneha's case is that everything is circumstantial. All we have are fragments, a credit card receipt, a grainy video of her walking out of a store, a missing pair of shoes, a phone left behind. Ron's theory was straightforward. Sneha had been in the area. Maybe she'd gone for a walk. Maybe she was getting coffee. Maybe she was in or around the towers when the first plane hit. And being a doctor, she ran toward the chaos. To help, to save someone, to do what doctors do. And in that moment, she became one of the faceless, one of the unidentified, a body buried in rubble, a name lost in ash. That's what Ron believed. That's what he told the police, the press, her family, and at first people agreed. The timeline supported it. She had been seen within a block of the towers the day before. Her apartment was a 10-minute walk from ground zero. She was smart, brave, trained in trauma care. Of course she would have helped. It made sense, until you looked closer, because when you examined the facts, the cracks started to show. For one, no one could prove she had ever come home after shopping. Yes, the items she purchased were missing, but so was her tote bag, which she could have been carrying all along. Yes, her phone was charging, but was that proof she came home, or that she had left it behind? Yes, she was missing, but there were dozens, maybe hundreds, of ways to vanish in New York City on any given day. And when you mix that with the chaos of 9/11, the possibilities become endless. Investigators began digging deeper. They looked at the building's keycard system. No record of Sneha entering after Ron left for work. They interviewed the doorman. He didn't remember seeing her. They checked nearby surveillance cameras. None showed her walking home. And then they started to hear things. From friends, from colleagues, from people who had known her in those final months. Stories about long nights drinking alone, bar fights, an arrest for shoplifting in early August, charges she denied and claimed were racially motivated. Friends said she'd grown distant, erratic. Her residency was falling apart. She talked less about her future, more about needing space. There were rumors of affairs. Her brother told investigators she had confided in him, that she'd been in a relationship with a woman, that she felt stifled by her marriage, that she wanted to disappear. Later, he would walk back those statements, said he had lied to protect her, but the damage was done. The official investigation took a darker turn. Maybe this wasn't a tragedy. Maybe this was a choice. That was the growing narrative among detectives, that Sneha had left voluntarily, that she had used 9/11, the chaos, the destruction, as a smokescreen to vanish. If you're going to disappear, they said, what better time? The theory was convenient, clean. It absolved them of further responsibility. No body, no crime. But Ron didn't buy it. Neither did her parents. They insisted she would never leave without telling someone. That she loved being a doctor. That she loved her husband, despite their rough patches. That she was impulsive, yes, but not suicidal. Not cruel. They kept pushing. Hired lawyers. Went to the media. And eventually, something strange happened. The city agreed to include her name among the official list of 9/11 victims. She became the 2,751st person lost. Her name was etched into the memorial, but not everyone accepted it. The FBI did not include her on its official victim list. The 9/11 Commission omitted her. Some journalists questioned the ethics of listing someone as a victim without concrete proof. Her story became a symbol, not just of tragedy, but of uncertainty. She was both lost and found, both alive and dead, both there and not. To this day, no one knows what happened between the hours of 4 p.m. on September 10th and 8:46 a.m. on September 11th. That gap is a void, and inside that void, anything could have happened. Did she meet someone after shopping? Did she go to a bar? A friend's place? Was she lured somewhere? Did she step outside that morning, drawn by smoke, only to be swallowed by debris? Or did she see the towers fall from a safe distance and keep walking? Every theory raises more questions, and every answer feels incomplete. All we know for sure is that one day she was there, vibrant, brilliant, flawed. And the next, she wasn't. That's the terror at the heart of it. Not just that she vanished, but that her story was overtaken by something bigger. That she became a footnote to a national horror. That no one knows how she died, or if she did at all. Only that, for her family, the collapse started the night before, when the city was still standing, and no one was watching the sky. There's a certain cruelty in ambiguity, a slow drip kind of torture. It's not the knowing that eats you alive, it's the maybes, the what-ifs, the possibilities that metastasize like tumors in the absence of answers. For the people closest to Sneha and Philip, that ambiguity never went away. If anything, it got worse. By the time the towers fell on the morning of September 11th, 2001, Sneha had already been missing for over 16 hours. Her husband Ron had assumed she'd spent the night elsewhere, something she had done before during periods of tension in their marriage. But when the sky turned black and bodies started falling from buildings, when the sirens replaced the birdsong and every phone line in New York died at once, he knew something was wrong. He called hospitals, called friends, drove to ground zero, waited. No one had seen her. The city was chaos, but chaos has layers. And beneath the national nightmare of terrorism, there was another, quieter dread creeping into Ron's mind. The dread that she hadn't been caught in the attack, that she hadn't died trying to help, that something else had happened, and it had started the night before. It was now confirmed, via security footage from Century 21, that Sneha was seen shopping between 5 and 6 p.m. on the 10th. She purchased over $500 worth of clothes and lingerie, items that would later be missing from her apartment. But that footage was the last confirmed sighting of her. After that, she fell off the map. Ron said he came home around 11:30 p.m. that night. Sneha wasn't there. The apartment was undisturbed. Her phone was plugged in. Her ID and credit cards were gone. Her usual handbag and a pair of new shoes were also missing. The clothes she bought, gone too. So where had she gone? Initial police reports speculated she had gone out drinking. It wasn't uncommon for her. Friends described her as social, sometimes impulsive, prone to long, unplanned nights in the city. But that explanation didn't satisfy the timeline. Bars had security cameras. Friends would have remembered seeing her. But there was nothing. Not a single confirmed sighting after she exited the department store. That's when the investigators started digging. And the more they dug, the more they found cracks in the image her family had been presenting. According to police, Sneha had recently been suspended from her medical residency at Cabrini Medical Center. Officially, the reason was cited as alcohol-related issues and absenteeism. Her family contested this. They said she had been retaliated against for reporting sexual harassment by a colleague. The truth was likely somewhere in between. There was also an open shoplifting charge on her record. In July, she had been arrested for stealing about $100 worth of items from a department store. Her family insisted it was a misunderstanding, that she had been racially profiled, that it was a setup. But the record stood. There were rumors, too, whispers about her sexuality. A brother who told police she'd confessed to having romantic relationships with women, that she was exploring parts of herself that she hadn't felt safe expressing in her marriage. He later walked the statement back, claiming he'd made it up to protect her, to explain why she might have left, or to cover for something darker. The problem was, every retraction opened another door. If the shoplifting didn't happen, why was it on file? If she didn't leave voluntarily, where did she go? If the relationship wasn't in trouble, why were there texts from Ron asking her to come home, begging her to pick up? Investigators grew suspicious. The more they pulled at the threads, the more the case began to unravel. It wasn't just about a woman who vanished. It was about a woman who had reasons to disappear, reasons to run, reasons to start over. But there was still no proof. No sightings. No note. No digital trail. Nothing. And then came the strangest detail of all, the key fob. Ron and Sneha's apartment building used an electronic key system to track entries. The system logged every time a resident used their key to access the front door or elevator. On the night of September 10th, there was no recorded key entry for Sneha after she left for shopping. But there was an entry at 8:43 a.m. on September 11th, just 3 minutes before the first plane struck. Investigators were stunned. Could it be her? Did she return that morning? Was she inside the apartment just as the world changed forever? It would explain why her clothes and handbag were gone. It would explain why she hadn't made calls. Maybe she panicked and ran toward the towers. But Ron said no. He insisted she never came back. That when he woke up that morning, she still wasn't there. That he would have heard the door. That the bed was untouched. That her things were still missing. Could he have been asleep and missed her? Or was someone else using her key? Or was the system wrong? The building managers said the key system occasionally mislogged entries. That there were known errors. That the timestamps weren't perfect. The theory was dropped. But it lingered. Because in a case this thin, even a glitch becomes a lifeline. The case only grew murkier from there. 2 days after September 11th, when bodies were still being pulled from rubble, Sneha's family began pushing the narrative that she had been a hero, that she had rushed to the towers to help, that she had died saving lives. It was a powerful image, a romantic one, but there was no proof. No witnesses placed her at the scene, no calls made from her. No one saw her in a white coat amidst the smoke. And while many found the idea touching, investigators found it convenient, especially when it came time to file for life insurance. Being classified as a 9/11 victim came with benefits, financial, legal, emotional. If Sneha had died the night before, none of that would apply. So the family fought, filed suit, argued that in the absence of evidence, the most compassionate assumption was that she had perished in the towers. And years later, they won. In 2008, after a prolonged legal battle, a New York State appeals court officially ruled that Sneha and Philip had died in the September 11th attacks. Her name was added to the memorial. Her story was closed, officially, but not really, because people who disappear have a way of haunting the places they leave behind. And the questions still gnaw at the edges. If she died in the towers, where was the footage? Where were the people she spoke to that morning? Where was her body? If she died before the towers fell, what happened in those silent hours? Did she meet someone? Did she make a plan? Was she caught in something darker? Every angle leads to a dead end. Every theory has holes. There are no credit card charges after the 10th. No phone records.
No emails. No social media.
She went dark, and while the world watched the sky burn, Sneha simply vanished. Some believe she was murdered, that she met someone after shopping, that she was taken, that her body lies in the East River or buried in a park, forgotten beneath the weight of 1,000 larger stories. Others believe she took her own life, that the pressure of her career, the collapse of her relationship, the disciplinary hearing, the drinking, the shame became too much. That 9/11 was a grim coincidence. That she had already gone by the time the towers were struck. But no note was left, and no body was found, and still others believe she planned it. That she walked out of that store knowing it would be the last time she'd be seen. That she had somewhere to go. That she had someone waiting. That she became one of the only people to use 9/11 to vanish into a new life. It's seductive, that theory. It makes sense of the void, but it doesn't make it true. Because to believe she disappeared on purpose means believing she left behind everyone she loved. Her husband, her parents, her future. That she burned her life to the ground and never looked back. And for those who knew her best, that's the hardest story to swallow. Because even if Sneha had demons, and she did, she wasn't heartless. She wasn't cold. She was passionate, empathetic, complicated. She made mistakes, yes, but she was still human. And now she's gone. swallowed by a moment so large, it made her story invisible. A disappearance inside a disaster, a name written in ash, a life blurred by fire, and the mirror she left behind only shows shadows. There are two memorials for Sneha and Philip. One is carved in granite, her name etched alongside thousands of others at the 9/11 Memorial in Lower Manhattan. It is dignified, solemn, and final. The other is unmarked, invisible, etched in silence. It exists in the moments no one saw, in the hours no one tracked, in the decisions and accidents and encounters that happened behind closed doors or in shadowed alleys. It lives in the space between the last confirmed sighting and the first falling tower. It lives in the doubt. Her parents visit the memorial sometimes. They bring flowers. Her brother no longer speaks publicly about her. Her husband remarried. But the story didn't end. Because stories like Sneha's don't end. They just stop being told. Every few years, a journalist will try to revive the case. They'll re-examine the footage, walk the streets she walked, talk to the same handful of friends, reprint the same photographs. But they can't find anything new. There's nothing to add. Just the absence. When someone disappears, people assume the mystery is the hardest part. But it isn't. The hardest part is the slow erasure. How quickly the world moves on. How even your most intimate details become plot points. How strangers dissect your failures. How your final days get rewritten, edited, sanitized, or distorted into whatever fits best into the prevailing story. Sneha's prevailing story was this: a woman who died trying to help others on September 11th. It's a story people wanted to believe. It was clean, heroic, tragic. But was it true? No one can say, and that's the horror of it. The system that eventually ruled her an official victim of 9/11 made its decision not based on evidence, but on probability. Her proximity to ground zero, her personality, her medical training, the timeline. It was a calculated compassion, but the facts never changed. No one saw her that morning. No one saw her run into the towers. No one found her remains. The official record closed the book. But the case stayed open just under the surface. Every few years, someone would claim they saw her. A bar owner in Queens, a nurse in Brooklyn. None of the sightings were ever confirmed. Her family insisted she wouldn't have left, that she wouldn't have gone that long without contacting someone, that the demons people described in the final months of her life were exaggerated or misrepresented, that Sneha was complicated. And that's the part most people missed. When you die during something massive, your story gets flattened. You become one of many. Your face becomes a symbol, not a person. And the little things, the fights you had, the lies you told, the nights you spent crying or drinking or getting into trouble, all of that gets polished away or weaponized. In Sneha's case, it was both. To some, she was a troubled woman whose life was spiraling. To others, she was a martyr lost in the smoke. But she was neither. She was human. She had ambition. She had mistakes. She had secrets. She had people who loved her. She had people who didn't understand her. She was real. And maybe that's why her story remains so unsettling. Because it reminds us that even real people can vanish. That even in a city filled with cameras and witnesses and noise, someone can just go. That even in a world obsessed with connection, there are gaps. And in those gaps, something terrible can live. There are theories, plenty. Some people still think she ran away, that she used the attacks as cover, that she planned it. But where would she go? How would she survive? Would she really never once reach out? Others think she was murdered, that she met someone the night of the 10th, that she was taken. But again, no body, no trace, no hint. Still others believe the official version, that she was near the towers, that she ran to help, that she died doing what she was trained to do. But why no proof? Why the glitchy key fob? Why the silence? Sometimes the lack of answers is the answer. Not all horror is loud. Not all disappearances involve screams or blood or struggle. Sometimes horror is quiet. A woman buys a dress, walks into the city, and never walks back. And the world is too distracted to notice. People talk about how 9/11 changed everything. And it did. But it also erased things. It erased people who weren't supposed to be there. It erased those who didn't fit the narrative. It erased stories that couldn't be verified. And Sneha's story was all of those. A loose thread no one wanted to pull too hard. A disappearance too messy to solve. A life too complex to honor simply. She became part of a number, a name on a wall. But she was more than that, and less, because we don't know who she was in those final hours. And maybe we never will. There's a photo of her from college. Long black hair, confident eyes, a quiet smile. In the photo, she's laughing at someone just out of frame. It's blurry, candid. You can almost hear the music. It looks like a normal night, a night where everything makes sense. That photo still hangs in her parents' house. It's one of the last they took before everything changed. Before a city lost its skyline. Before a family lost their daughter. Before a name became a mystery. Before a face became a ghost. Before everything. And it begs the question, how many others like her are there? How many stories were lost that day? How many names were never written? How many calls were never answered? How many shadows slipped between the cracks? We'll never know, because sometimes the missing stay missing, and the ones we missed never come home.